Hello, and welcome to the Strategy Made Simple podcast. I'm Matthew Rempel, and today we're going to be talking about a social enterprise that is integrally tied with a nonprofit, and some of the benefits that they get from that relationship. More specifically, we're going to be talking about how they focused their efforts on a particular target market and how that benefited them in the kinds of work they're able to do, how that narrowing of focus helps them to do their work really well, some of their methods about mentoring and training, as well as some previous challenges my guest has had balancing impact with revenue generation. Here is my guest.
My name is Lauren Lee. Actually, I'm changing my last name to just Lee, so L-E-E. And I'm the Social Enterprise Manager at Resource Assistance for Youth.
Excellent. So I know that within the social enterprise portfolio of Resource Assistance for Youth, or RaY, RaY Works is the main pillar at this point.
Yeah.
Could you describe what that is?
Yeah, so it's the main pillar. It's the only pillar at this point. It is at this point in time, a moving and junk removal company. We have hopes to expand, and right now it's in pretty vague terms. We hope to bring on other sort of complementary activities to what we are currently doing. Right now, we've actually honed down the moving and junk removal a little bit more specifically. We focused our moving on moves with other nonprofits. We do a lot of commercial moves as well, so with other businesses in the community. But I would say at this point, the largest percentage of our moves are with other agencies, non-governmental organizations, but also, government organizations within our existing network. We do a lot of donation pickups. We do a lot of moves for participants that are connected with other agencies. We do a lot of office moves, things like that. And so we've sort of honed in on that with the potential to expand it. We really wanted to trial that and do it really, really, really well. And then as we built up our capacity, we'll be able to kind of widen the scope a little bit more.
Right. So it sounds like it's not just about moving offices or the people who are working within the nonprofit, but it's also working with the people who are in residential services, who live in low-income housing, helping them move from place to place as well.
Correct.
So it's not just commercial moving, but it's also residential,
right,
specifically focused on helping nonprofits.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Right now, what we have found works best is if we move, let's say, someone who is of a lower income and is needing some moving supports, if they're connected with a, let's say, housing program, let's say West Central Women's Resource Center, or the Link, or any number of agencies that have housing programs. And we find that works best because depending on the circumstances of the move, having the case management support is a pretty vital part of it all. Depending on the circumstances, there could be a lot of stresses going on and other variables that might require support, and then our team can really focus on the kind of the logistics of the move itself, while making sure we're being sort of mindful and supportive of if there's other stuff going on. So there really is, it requires a bit of a team effort, and that's why we require that if someone is needing those services, that they do so kind of in conjunction with the housing program or the nonprofit that they're connected to.
Right, and because RaY is also a nonprofit, you have some of those existing understandings of what it means to be a supported individual in housing.
Definitely, and that's, I think, what we've identified as one of our biggest strengths is that we have done just an infinite number of moves now of participants who are, facing multiple barriers to having secure and stable housing, and we understand that demographic really well. And so we're able to provide a really empathetic and understanding lens to what we do, and it just creates a little bit more of a fluidity to the move itself and carrying out some of the logistics. So it's so far worked really well. And I think we'll just kind of build from there now that we've trialed that and seen that it's proven to work. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what is the overall mission of RaY Works?
The mission is to provide supportive work placements for youth coming out of our education and training program here at RaY. So we constantly have a rotation of different youth coming through the classroom where they focus on gaining some workplace skills. And then when it comes to sort of the practicum part of the program, we offer a supportive work placement where they can continue to be connected with RaY and be surrounded by the hub model that is RaY while completing their time within RaY Works. So we tend to get participants who the case manager who's assigned to that person has decided they might benefit from continued support for a little bit longer before going into the community. And so we'll work on things ranging from reliability, attendance, communication styles, things like that. Some of those pillars that are really, really, really important to kind of maintaining that community employment. And then we work with the case manager to place them with another employer, and that opens up the spot again for someone else who might benefit from that opportunity. So we do that, and we also offer affordable and accessible rates to people who are interested in getting our moving or junk removal services, and all the profit that comes out of that revenue generating side of what we do goes back into RaY, back into core, back into sort of plugging the holes that exist in agency where funding may be lacking for all the time, periods of time. It just totally depends. So it's offering like a bit of flex to the leadership and the accounting team as they try to figure out this insane puzzle that is funding for a really large agency.
Yeah. Because if one of the main issues with nonprofits is that funding often comes with specific programs in mind or specific activities. So getting earned revenue ends up being unrestricted. So you can use it wherever you need it at the time. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? One of the biggest takeaways that I've learned from this part of building this up and having it run and learning lessons is that it's definitely not a silver bullet to like to having unlimited funds at all. No. And we will always, as RaY Works, we will always rely on funding to fund some of our positions. But what we can do is we can take those funds that are maybe, like you said, a little bit more restricted and requires reporting and limited in its scope, and we can take that and we can earn it, kind of convert it into revenue that then we can then use in a little bit more adaptable ways. Right, so you're using the specific funding for, let's say, supportive workplaces to then provide a space for somebody to work within RaY Works. And while they're working there, they're part of the earned revenue generation. Yes. Which then goes back into the main organization. Okay. Excellent. So that really ties in the various different pieces of RaY and just stitches them together into one cohesive piece of organization. It's touching on several different areas. Okay. Yeah, definitely. And RaY Works is very plugged into everything that sort of RaY does. Especially the housing program, but really everything. So we're tied into the education and training part of RaY, and we are a big support to our housing team who are doing the job of so many of the folks that we work with and do moves for outside the agency. So they're supporting participants in finding either housing in the private market, or we also have a housing program at RaY, which is called transitional housing. So we actually are the leaseholders on a certain number of units where we can provide free housing for a period of time. So in all those instances, there's moves inevitably that needs to happen. So we're there to also support those case managers, and we provide free moves for those programs. So again, those programs don't have a budget line for moves because it's very hard to get funding to do so. And so we're able to then step in and sort of fill that gap that exists within those programs and really help the lives of those case managers and those participants quite a bit because we provide a service that is hard for some people to obtain because it's expensive and it's logistically complicated sometimes, and we're there as they need. So I think I would imagine if you were to ask, some other RaY employees, what does RaY Works mean to you, or how does it help you in your job? It has a pretty substantial impact, depending on the person. But yeah, I think it makes the lives easier for many folks. Yeah, because it's surprisingly expensive to move.
It's so expensive. I've never
if you are stable,
paid for movers in my life.
Yeah, and imagining if you're stable, you already have a vehicle,
Yeah.
you already have a group of people willing to help. Even then, it takes a ton of time and effort to go through that process. So
Absolutely, and a lot of these people
different.
don't have the social supports, sometimes, but not always, or they don't know someone that has a vehicle, or has the time, and so they're the ones that need those supports the most. They're often the ones that move the most, and they are the least likely to be able to get those supports.
Yeah.
Which is a cruel reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Switching gears just a touch, you mentioned earlier that RaY Works used to have more activities in its portfolio, but it recently pared down to the moving and junk removal. Can you tell me about the decision-making process that happened there and what it was like?
So we didn't have activities beyond moving and junk removal, but we did more types of moving. So we did residential moving, namely, was the additional one, which is a large population, if you think about it. And we do still get inquiries of people who are interested in using our moving services from, moving from point A to point B. However, we found that considering where our capacity was at, we currently have 2 trucks. We don't work 12-hour days. A lot of moving companies will work 10 to 12-hour days, and we committed early on to to prioritizing health and safety and having 8-hour days. We're also training youth here. We want to make sure that we are treating everyone well. Of course, that's absolute priority. So to do, let's say, a large house with 4 bedrooms and a garage full of stuff, to be able to do that realistically in a day was proving challenging. And we just wanted to make sure that anything we were doing really, really well, and that we were producing really high quality of service so that we could have that be the foundation from which we grow, rather than having a huge scope and taking on every job and finding that we weren't quite there to meet that demand. So that was a bit of a lesson learned, and I think a little bit of shift in my thinking as to, yes, this is a defining difference between maybe a startup of just a regular for-profit business versus a social enterprise. We came in with a certain mandate that we were committed to for good reason. There were reasons behind it, but it did maybe limit what we could take on.
Right.
And it wasn't just about what's going to just bring us the most money. It was, yes, what's going to bring us money, but also works within what our mandate is as RaY.
And the restrictions that you've set for that, including the times of day, the health and safety.
Yeah, the prioritizing of mentoring and training while we're doing it.
Right.
And moving is an extremely physical job, obviously.
Very.
So it was really important to us, actually, that we made sure that we weren't pushing people to the brink of potential injuries or fatigue. I mean, everyone's tired. I think everyone gets a good night's sleep, but we wanted to be respectful and responsible in the scope.
Yeah. Physical work that makes you tired is different than physical work that you cannot continue to do past 40.
Yeah.
It's a different level there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So within that, what are some of the specific things you're doing? Because you mentioned it's a training program, as well as you want to maintain that high level of service. What are some of the specific things you're doing? Because a lot of people working are going to be trainees or supported individuals.
Yeah.
How are you maintaining that level of service quality? What are the steps there?
One of the biggest and most impactful things I think we did was increasing our crew size.
Okay.
So we used to have a 2-person crew. It would consist of a mentor and someone who has lots of moving experience, but also committed to the mentoring and training side of their role. And then someone coming up through our education and training program who's a little bit more green, often, physically ready for the challenge, but was on the job learning techniques and learning how to use equipment and learning pacing and all those sort of things, customer service. We've now increased it to 3. And what has ended up happening is that we'll still have that mentor, we'll still have that kind of trainee, but we'll always have another person who make sure that we can keep up the pace we need to make sure the job can be done efficiently, but also has a little bit more experience than a trainee. And what it has happened is that we're bringing on someone who completed their position with RaY Works, were placed in the community, and there are now quite a few people who have come through our training and either are looking for casual work, or often it's kind of on a casual basis, but we'll bring them back and be able to provide them more work. And what they're able to provide for us is a level of experience already. They know the job. They know what it's like also to be that person coming up through the training program. And so they're able to make sure that they're coming with a level of understanding of what we're trying to do from more of a social impact perspective, but also the demands of what the service itself requires. And so they are, let's say there is a more difficult move, or there's just some challenging things to move, like appliances, really tricky corners in a staircase with couches, things like that. They're able to be that second person for the kind of lead, the supervisor, and make sure those things get done really safely and efficiently. So the 3-person crew has, I think, been pretty vital. And it also creates this really great dynamic where it's just a bit more of this team and family, the three of them, the kind of the three musketeers. Yeah. So that, I think, has been a pretty pivotal difference. And then at the end of the day, we're finding that the jobs are getting done in the time that we've allotted. We're sometimes even quicker than a lot of other teams because we're a 3-person crew opposed to a 2-person crew. And they just, as a crew, seem to be having a good time. They have a good kind of camaraderie, and that's pretty cool to see, actually. I think that's been pretty impactful.
Right, because in addition to having the work experience already, the third person will understand the culture of the work because they've been through the program. They'll know what RaY's about.
And they're able to kind of, I think, give support and encouragement to the person coming through as well.
Right.
And they not so long ago were in that same position.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of that empathy that comes from similar backgrounds, or at least a similar experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Are there any other specific activities that you do within RaY to make that work better, either on the training side or on the moves?
Yeah, so on the training side of things, the on-the-job training of the kind of the hard and soft skills, I would say our mentor and main trainer has the most impact, right? Yeah. They're there with them every day, all day. They're working side by side. There's a lot of learning by showing and doing and modeling that happens. Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest thing that impacts employability is the life circumstances that exist no matter what, if you're at work or not at work. Mm-hmm. And that can have the biggest impact on your ability to maintain employment. For example, if there's housing instability going on, if there's mental health challenges going on, if there's food insecurity going on, or all of the above, which is usually all of the above, family dynamics. By being plugged into RaY still while they're doing their placement, they're seeing their case manager every day. They're able to go to our main Sherbrooke location every day during they usually check in at least once a day over lunch. They can talk to us, say they have a housing case manager, they can easily connect with them there. Mm-hmm. They come with us when we do all of our donation pickups, so they have access to food hampers. And so they're able to address a lot of those potentially ongoing issues while they're at work.
Right.
Not while they're on the job, but kind of points throughout the day. They can check in and potentially have other needs addressed that have come up. Often, I think those check-ins happen at the end of the day, before they leave, and you kind of check in with them. They'll mention, I need help with this, I need help with that. And I think one of the biggest pieces, again, is the role of the supervisor mentor, because they're the one that has established this relationship. So he'll often come to us and say, listen, so-and-so brought up this need. How can how can we help support him on this one? So that all contributes to the person being trained be able to like show up and be reliable and to build trust, which goes both ways. You know, they trust us, and then in turn they're sort of willing to. There just is more investment on their part because they know that we have their back.
Right.
So even if we have issue in the classroom portion of the education and training that they do prior to their starting with RaY Works, there's issues with being late or just overall reliability and attendance that tends to totally flip around as soon as they start with RaY Works.
Okay.
Which I attribute mainly to that relationship they build as a crew. And sort of being able to build trust. There's a level of investment, like I matter, they need me. And they, I think, also recognize what we're able to help them with. And so they're just, there tends to, a solid foundation in the relationship tends to grow from there.
Yeah. I imagine there's also a sense of, if I don't show up and do the work well, I'm not only disappointing an organization, which is some faceless thing, but I'm disappointing this person, my mentor.
Yeah.
The person I'm in the car with all day.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's not like we don't have issues where people aren't late and don't come, but they tend to resolve quickly. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's something that happens in any workplace.
Yeah.
If we want to say that we have no more attendance issues ever, then that's a whole different kind of unicorn we're trying to chase after.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely unrealistic. But you know, there have been times where someone generally they are with us for 8 weeks, 8 weeks plus. There are some people that they don't miss one day.
Okay.
And you know, it's for sure a personality thing, but I think a big part of that is the relationship that they've built with RaY as a whole, but also with the individuals who they know they are relying on and are relying on them. It's a reciprocal sort of relationship.
Right. So then how does it feel when somebody's gone through the education and training program, they've gone through the 8 weeks with RaY Works, and then they are off to find other employment? How does that handoff feel, and how do you maintain capacity in those moments?
So the handoff is a long time coming.
Okay.
We plan for it well. We know exactly how long they'll likely be with us.
Right.
We work with the case manager to figure out what will be the best type of placement. Obviously, the participant is an extremely important part of that. It's important that they have a voice or a say in what they will do next. Sometimes it's a total departure from RaY Works. Sometimes it's a very close alignment. And so the case manager that is assigned to the participant will be, as their time with RaY Works is happening, they'll be sort of looking and planning for what that placement will look like in conjunction with the participant. And then when the time has come for them to go on to that placement, hopefully we figured out the timing pretty perfectly. If it's not perfect, that's okay. We can keep them on longer. The priority is to make sure that they're with income.
Yeah.
During this whole process, we don't want to have them have any issues with no income. So, and then again, we plan it with the next cohort coming through the classroom. Okay, who will be a good fit? Who is looking for work that's similar or the same as RaY Works offers?
Right.
Who could potentially use those kind of supports that RaY uniquely has to offer for a little bit longer. And then the case manager will come to me and say, we think this person will be a really good fit. We'll often give them a shift or two to kind of let them test it out and see if they think it'll be a good fit.
Right.
And then usually it's pretty good. It's pretty aligned. As the person exits, there's someone to come in within a week or two. And if there's a gap, then we have a roster of folks who have worked with RaY Works in the past that we'll bring in on a casual basis. So we're able to piece together kind of the labor requirements pretty well.
Right.
And another unique thing about RaY is that we have another program called Growing Opportunities that provides odd jobs to participants that come in that are looking for casual work. Generally, it tends to be property shifts, we call them, around RaY. So they'll work in the kitchen, they'll shovel snow, they'll clean, they'll wash windows, those sort of things. And it's a way for them to sort of get a taste of the world of work and hopefully slowly build up their capacity for them to want to find a little bit more of ongoing employment. We'll often get folks that are interested in working through growing opportunities, and they're ready for something a little bit more with a bigger time commitment that is obviously more physical, things like that.
Right.
So we have a couple options of ways of getting the labor that we need. That's both beneficial for us, but also, the most important is it beneficial for them?
Right.
Is this something they're interested in? Is this going to help them on their resume? Are there skills we can help them to build? Those sort of things.
Right. So it's at the same time as the casual roster is helping you fill in the gaps when, let's say, a person exits the program, or you just need that third person in the truck.
Yeah.
It also provides them with the space to take, let's say, a part-time job, because they know they can also pick up shifts on a casual basis with you to keep filling up their required income.
Yeah, and some people, it may not even be a gap. They are just looking for casual work,
right.
And that's what works best for them for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
It could be their mental health space that they're in at that time. It could be that they are on some other form of assistance where they maybe don't want to work over a certain number of hours, as that could compromise their ability to, get other access to other funds. It could be what works on their schedule with their partner and availability, things like that. So
right, or childcare.
Or childcare.
Yeah.
So we go based on someone comes to us and we'll try to meet them where they're at as much as possible.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So then what is your personal history? What got you involved in social enterprise? What was your path to where you are now?
It's a bit of a varied path, but it sort of makes sense, I think, when you look back on it. I did some work in the nonprofit sector after I graduated from University of Winnipeg, and I enjoyed it. It was, I did a lot of work with youth and volunteers. Then the opportunity came up for me to open a cafe with a group of people called Fools and Horses Coffee Company. And I had, throughout my university years and even afterwards, worked in customer service and hospitality for a lot of years, and I really loved it. It was something that was good to me. I felt like I really kind of grew through those roles because I really enjoy being with people. I am very organized. I loved providing service, those kind of services, hospitality service. So when the opportunity came to open the cafe, I sort of seized it. And that was a lot of hard work. It was really, really, really challenging, but learned a ton about starting a business and all the challenges that come with that.
Yep.
When I started having kids, I sort of reassessed how I wanted my life to look, what that work-life balance would look like, and it was a little off-kilter at that time. So I made the decision to sell my shares, and at that time, I was looking for what I wanted to do next. And so this opportunity came up, and it felt like it was a good melding of both of my kind of paths of work experience that I had walked up to that point. So having kind of the business side of things with the nonprofit side is essentially, the definition of social enterprise is melding those two things together. And I hadn't been involved in social enterprise at all up until that point, but I felt like it was something that I could figure out how to navigate. And it was definitely has been a learning curve, and I didn't really know what I was doing when I started. I think I thought I did a little bit, but I didn't.
I think you might be underselling yourself a little bit, because we first met when you were supervising me at Sam's Place, a different social enterprise that's working at...
But I wasn't administratively, at an administrative level, I wasn't controlling too much. So there was just a lot I had to learn about
It's
this is a big picture.
So RaY was a new role for you, filling in a new
role.
space. Okay.
Yeah, but yes, the principles and the idea behind social enterprise was not unfamiliar. I totally understood that. I think coming from even though Fools and Horses, we had some ideas around having a more community-oriented business, and what that. So for us, there was an environmental component. There was, living. We had committed to a living wage and all these sort of things. We were still a for-profit business, and so ultimately we couldn't make any of those things happen unless we were making a profit, and so that was a priority. And so it was a shift to go from that to working with different funding streams, figuring out how to find that balance between social impact and revenue generation and things like that. Like, it's a fine balance, and there's maybe general formulas, but really it's kind of what you make it, right? And you have to figure out, and that was a big thing that we focused on, was really bringing everything down to the studs and figuring out, like, what do we want this to be?
Right.
And I think that's a really, really crucial part of creating social enterprise, is like, why are we doing this exactly? And because it's not as simple as just making money.
Yeah.
And if it was as simple as making money, we would open a casino or something. We wouldn't have the capital to do that, but you know what I mean? It wasn't about what is the thing we can do that will bring us the most dollars and cents. So,
yeah,
there had to be more behind it.
Do you mind if we go a little more into the Fools and Horses conversation? Because it sounds like you've learned a lot of lessons there that you are really glossing over and saying, I applied the lessons learned to RaY.
Yeah.
But the mention of Fools and Horses still for profit, so it needed to earn enough income to support and keep running.
Yeah.
And then the impact would also happen. Because nonprofits are similar, just the funding comes from a different place.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that tension? Like, how did that express itself through the Fools and Horses experience?
Before we started, we came at everything with just theory, right?
Right.
We have this idea of how we want this to look. This is how we think we're going to bring in the money. This is what we think the numbers will look like. This is what we want the wage to be. This is what we want our environmental stance to look like. But then when we actually put everything into action, we realized that it was going to be more difficult than we had imagined. And then you have to sort of take a hard look at, well, what are our priorities? If we can't do all of this at the same time, what do we prioritize? Is there some way that we can shift things a little bit? And you want to stay true to what you want it to be, but ultimately, if you can't keep the lights on, none of this is going to happen.
Right.
And so, yeah, there's just naturally a tension. And you just learn, like, well, okay, if we're going to offer a living wage, like, I won't be able to pay myself for a little while because we're a startup, and this is way more money than we thought we would require.
Wages are expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you get running and you're like, oh, okay, we actually need more people on staff at any given time to make sure that we can pull this off. And so if just the labor costs are higher than you anticipated, then you have to cut somewhere, which, if you, depending on what you're willing to compromise, it might just be your own salary, for example, which I think for a lot of small business owners, that is the reality, is like, okay, to make sure everyone gets paid, to make sure the lights stay on, to make sure I'm paying all my suppliers, I won't get paid this month.
Right.
First, in my position, that's not an option. I will always get paid. There's certain funding that's secured no matter what.
Right, presently at RaY. Yeah.
And so, and that's definitely not the case for every social enterprise, but that's just fundamentally a difference, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, going back to the Fools and Horses thing, it was for sure a tension of, it's just the theory crashing into reality, and how do you sort that out? How do you decide what you're going to maybe let slide a little bit? Maybe you'll try to get back to that later. And I mean, I'm not involved anymore, and I haven't been through COVID, but add COVID to that.
Oh yeah.
How do you, as a social and economically and environmentally conscious business, how do you remain true to your values, but also stay alive?
Yeah. In some of the other conversations I've had with social enterprises, the discussion of, can we cut staff if the staff are supported individuals? And that question is one that weighs on people, because sometimes the work and the money is not there to support a team of, well, however big they are then, but a team of 80% of what they have now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, definitely heard of similar struggles, regardless of the structure of the organization.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that experience clearly influenced the conditions of the work that you're willing to accept. And how has that changed perhaps the way that RaY Works is run? Does that affect anything there?
They feel to me like very different experiences. There's just being an owner of something. Again, there are social enterprises where the owner, the person running it, is the owner. I'm not the owner.
Yeah.
So running it, there isn't that same financial impact on me personally, and that stress that goes along with that can really impact your quality of life. It did for me, at least, because it's super stressful. And so it doesn't mean that this role isn't stressful, and that ultimately I feel a certain amount of pressure. I want this to work. I want this to work well. I want to make sure that there's a lot of people not a lot of people, but there are some people that are looking to me to make sure this works as much as possible. So I do feel that pressure, but it's to have some funding supports that aren't there forever, but at least some to at least get things started and get things rolling is, I think, in our instance, is like a huge gift. So hopefully we can get we can get things sorted to make sure that we get things rolling, that we have some good revenue generation going on, that we've sorted what our social impact goals are, we know what we're doing, and even if some of those funding supports fade away or are no longer there, we're hopefully a few years into business, and then we can sustain ourselves from that point on. So I think that one of my unique perspectives is that I feel like a little bit lucky. I'm just I can't believe that someone's going to give us money to cover this expense right now. That's insane. Just because that's so different from my experience as a small business owner, we have a mandate to have a living wage as RaY Works. We also had a goal of having living wage as Fools and Horses, but guess what? We didn't have any money from any other source to provide that, right? We wanted to do that through the revenue we were generating. And for RaY Works right now, we have some funding that can help us reach some of those goals, even if our revenue generation hasn't caught up quite yet, if that makes sense.
Right, so that's just one of the benefits of being connected to a nonprofit and a charity that
I
allows you to do more.
So, and then I don't know if that is an unpopular opinion, because there's so many struggles that go along with running a social enterprise or an organization that has a social impact goals and all the additional expenses that go along with that. You will always rely on funding for, it's just so hard to carry those expenses otherwise. And I recognize that that's stressful, but I also just wasn't used to running a business, but also having funding coming in. And so sometimes it feels kind of nice because it helps a lot.
Yep.
But I don't know. I think my feeling is that the nonprofit or social enterprise world and the private business world are sort of separate, and I think there's actually more commonality in some of the goals. There can be some commonality, more than we think, and it feels a little bit like they're pitted against each other a little bit.
They don't have to.
They don't have to be. I don't think so.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of small businesses that are, and with no small expense, are deciding we want to do this for our community. And for a lot of those people, it's individuals that's eating into their bottom line.
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely admirable. But sometimes it doesn't feel like they're incentivized to do that.
Or supported to do it.
Or supported?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of the same, like people are treated the same no matter if they have, let's say, environmental or social impact goals as a for-profit business or not. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming and talking with me.
No, thank you. It was a pleasure. I felt very animated as I got going. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have feelings about this. Okay. Thanks, Matthew.
And thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, please share it with somebody else. And if you'd like to find more, you can find it in our archive at strategymadesimple.ca. And if you're running a social enterprise and you need help with either building business systems or with your marketing, we can help. Contact us info@strategymadesimple.ca. Now, as you go, trying to continue improving how you make your impact, keep it simple.